You heard it right. Just as Trump's policies are finally starting to put real money back in the pockets of working and middle class Americans, British run media and their U.S. echo chamber have launched Russiagate 2.0, aimed squarely at Gen Z and the youth wing of MAGA. First, let's listen to this weekend's economic report from the Trump administration.
I would expect in the first 2 quarters, we are going to see the inflation curve bend down and the real income curve substantially accelerate. And when those 2 lines cross, Americans are going to feel it. But Maria, I will tell you what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is tell the American people that they don't know how they're feeling, which is what the Biden administration did.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is saying that people will strongly notice ahead of the critical midterms that the economy has dramatically improved for them. Nothing less than that will win the midterms.
Well, first of all, if you look at the history of inflation, right, what happened was that there was runaway Democrat spending in Joe Biden's term, and we got inflation up almost to 10%. It averaged 5% over the 4 years. And that has created a situation where, for example, mortgage rates went up. And so the typical payment for a monthly mortgage payment almost doubled. A bag of groceries that cost $400 a month when President Trump left office is $500 or $515 when President Trump came back this time. And so that there's this really big hole that's been dug. And then the question you could also ask as an economist is, how do I summarize all those different prices and everything? And one of the ways you could do it is just look at purchasing power, the real wage. But purchasing power, I'll just finish this and then I'll get back to it. The purchasing power dropped by about $3,000 under Joe Biden because the wages didn't keep up with prices. Under President Trump, it's already gone up by about $1,200. We understand that people still feel the pain of the high prices, but we're closing the gap and filling the gap fast.
That's economic advisor Kevin Hastert saying that we're halfway to making up for what workers lost in earning power under Joe Biden.
When you look at overall inflation for the first year of Trump versus Biden, overall inflation was up 4.3%, higher than Trump, just up 1.6%. Groceries under Biden in that time, up 3.8%, with Trump up 1.3%. And then when it comes to gas, this is crazy. Biden up 24.4%, with Trump it is actually down 5.4%. That is where the biggest difference is. And we heard from the HUD Secretary, Scott Turner, this afternoon. They are racing to cut red tape for construction projects because the belief among officials here is that if housing is the #1 place where people are getting killed when it comes to affordability, if people are cutting red tape and able to build more houses and apartments, then the prices will come down. Pretty basic supply and demand in play.
And that was Peter Doocy reporting on his comparison of inflation under Trump versus what we experienced under our completely controlled 46th president. So we're making progress, folks, on the thing that matters most to people, the fact that a lot of us have had trouble making ends meet, let alone feeling economically secure enough to plan for a future. I think President Trump will have more to say about lowering costs for home building, food, and healthcare over the course of the next week. But if you listened to the mainstream media over the last week, you heard that MAGA was falling apart or was already dead because of a swarm of complainers and doomsayers. Nick Fuentes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Robert Barnes, Candace Owens all say that Trump has somehow sold his soul. The headline by the British Telegraph was typical. So is this one from the British website unheard? The only thing real about the full-volume propaganda campaign against President Trump is that Russiagate 2.0, hurriedly put in motion by the British Secret Services, involves the very same people who created the original Russiagate. I'm Barbara Boyd, and I've been documenting British subversion operations against Donald Trump ever since 2016. I've studied their moves to subjugate the United States again much longer than that. So today I want to do 2 things. Show you the real story of Gen Z, the 18 to 28-year-olds of every color and creed who shocked the pundits in 2024 by voting for Donald Trump in massive numbers. Two, I want to expose how this same Gen Z is being targeted right now to be used as a Jacobin shock force in regime change operations, just like the Jacobins, the original ones of the French Revolution. If we understand this, we can cut straight through the British psychological warfare now aimed at splintering MAGA, particularly its youth wing, and we can make Charlie Kirk's unfinished work a living reality. Before we dive in, please like and share this video. It increases our reach on YouTube and helps us get this story to the young people who need most to hear about it. Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA have been credited by the media and by the Trump campaign for organizing Gen Z and millennials to turn out for Trump on November 2024. It's easy to see why if you listen to Charlie Kirk talk about the generation he was out to save. Here's Charlie at the Republican convention.
You see, young people are idealists. They respond to vision. For the past 4 years, they've seen the vision of the Biden-Harris regime. That vision is you'll own nothing and be happy. The Democrats say instead of owning a home, you'll rent a 400-square-foot studio apartment. Instead of owning a car, you'll rent a scooter using some app. Their vision is this: limit your dreams, give up, aim lower, be content with less. If you're a 20-something in America, life has been really tough. You've watched home prices rise 47% since 2020, 47%. Home ownership is now out of reach unless you make over $106,000 a year. Since I last spoke at the Republican convention 4 years ago, I've become a husband and father. In fact, we have 2 under 2. I think I get extra points for that. For millions of people my age, that is a dream that feels farther away than ever under the Biden-Harris administration. According to current projections, 1/3 of today's young Americans will never get married. The average American is having fewer children than ever before. Why? It's because for far too many, they simply can't afford them. The basic things our parents enjoyed are increasingly out of reach for Gen Z and millennials. You see, the American dream has become a luxury item for the wealthy elite. Happy countries have children. Broken countries have addiction, depression, and suffering. Democrats have given hundreds of billions of dollars to illegals and foreign nations, while Gen Z has to pinch pennies just so that they can never own a home, never marry, and work until they die, childless. Under Biden, our young people own nothing and they are miserable. Donald Trump refuses to accept this fake, pathetic, mutilated version of the American dream. When he was president, young people were richer than ever before, and he will do it again.
Now, on September 10th, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The hand that guided that assassination knew that you can't replace someone like Charlie. He, like Donald Trump, was a unique historical individual. But the response to that assassination surprised this nation's enemies. Young people turned out in droves across the nation in spontaneous memorials and celebrations of Kirk. Thousands opened a Bible or attended church for the first time in a long time. A youth movement even bigger than Charlie Kirk was coalescing, particularly under the stewardship of Erica Kirk and Vice President J.D. Vance. There was justified talk about MAGA continuing after President Trump's term with a new generation of leaders devoted to the American system economic and political ideas President Trump brought back from the tomb where revisionist historians had put them. There was justified talk about actually achieving many of Trump's most time-sensitive ideas, like the total rebuild of the U.S. economy after more than 50 years of managed destruction and decline, a stable and peaceful world trading system among nation states, humanity's colonization of the moon and Mars. That's when the British operation against Trump intensified. Charlie Kirk's death had to be the end of the youth wing of MAGA. Thus, you see the exaggerated media push around Fuentes, the Marjorie Taylor Greene split, the Candace Owen raves, and the emergence of Zohan Mandami as the new promoted champion of alienated and desperate young people. All of it is aimed at splintering MAGA, and particularly its very significant force of organized young people. As the blogger Tom Luongo characterized the last months, happy holidays from your friends at Langley and GCHQ. If you want to take a deeper dive into the history I'm about to summarize, please go to Promethean Action and subscribe to our newsletter. I monitor the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace because it has been a front for British operations ever since its founding. It's currently partnered, for example, with the British Academy to study, quote, global instabilities arising from the collapse of globalization. That's how I learned about the September violence and regime change in Nepal. Carnegie asserts that Gen Z toppled the geriatric and unstable government there after it banned social media. The achievement of all of that? They got social media back, which is the modern tool for organizing continuous regime change operations. Here's how Carnegie described Gen Z, quote, social media organized, decentralized, and violent in a young man's uprising against official corruption. That, of course, has been the recipe for practically every regime change operation run by intelligence services since the advent of the internet. It was the formula for Barack Obama's Arab Spring regime change operations in the Middle East. Richard Poe traces its origins back to the Portugal Carnation Revolution of 1974. Typically, in these operations, the disfavored old guard is thrown out. They are replaced by another malleable figure who will do the empire's bidding. Social tensions ease because of the control revolt. If you know your history, the American Revolution is one of the few shining exceptions to this game. In Nepal, the operation was obviously branded Gen Z in capital letters like Coca-Cola, rather than the usual branding involving a color or flower. There is a symbol attached to this branding. It's the one-piece pirate skull from Japanese anime. Now, the very same branding popped up Saturday in Politico's coverage of violent protests against the government in Mexico City. Politico's headline emphasized that Gen Z protests were gaining momentum there. The claim is that young people are revolting against government corruption and capture by the drug cartels. We'll have to analyze what happened over the course of the week. Contrast that political headline with the lament Politico had last month about the Jacobin No Kings protests against Trump. Gen Z didn't show up as aging boomers pathetically took to the streets. There's just no way you can conduct regime change without a substantial youth component. Think about the future Charlie Kirk, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump are planning for Gen Z. It is focused on getting illegals out of job and wage competition, including getting rid of H-1Bs for entry-level jobs. It focused on an immediate building boom in housing and financing to be able to afford a home. It focused on ending the college scam that was only creating uneducated, untrained, hopelessly indebted graduates. It focused on creating the types of jobs and incomes which could sustain having and raising kids. It involves mass education in history, science, and the classics. Now, President Trump often says that his primary role in life has been to solve problems, and he's done it remarkably. There is no better memorial to Charlie Kirk than solving this one, taking the cultural optimism that exploded after his death and turning it into a lived reality for millions of young Americans. To make this real, we have to clearly identify the enemy, neutralize his operation, and build, baby, build. The nihilistic doom scrollers and their handlers want Gen Z to be a battering ram for the empire, not builders of a new American century. They've been on a tear this past month, and the volume is only going to go up as the economy improves under Trump. More prosecutions are commenced against the traitors, and more strikes on the British-run drug money operation happen in the Caribbean. So let's pull this together. The economy is finally shifting in favor of working people. You're hearing it from Bessett, from Hastert, from on-the-ground inflation comparisons. That's reality, not narrative. At the same moment, a British-led media course declares that MAGA is fracturing, dying, tearing itself apart. That's narrative, not reality. Meanwhile, the youth movement that rallied around Trump and was galvanized by the assassination of Charlie Kirk is being targeted for destruction. They're being invited to join in black-pilled despair about Trump, quote, selling out MAGA. Or worse, they're being told to get in the streets and get violent against Trump, the fascist dictator. Charlie Kirk knew that this generation could have a very different fate if the focus was putting them in the driver's seat toward a productive identity and a future. Promethean Action is dedicated to realizing that idea. But in order to do that, we have to expand our operations and get on the social media sites where young people live. That requires money for staffing. Please donate as much as you can to help us do this. I'll see you again to answer your questions in our question and answer show on Thursday. Thanks very much for listening.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.